Thanks for listening to Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast, keeping you up to date with the latest in American soccer. And don't forget to subscribe.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast. My name's Steven Jotter, and actually not down in Dallas, but up in Minnesota, it's Jake Watroba. No Romanka this week. Jake, it is Championship Sunday in America. We got the Kansas City Chiefs, who will play the San Francisco 49ers in Super Bowl, and this is going to be our 1-minute football chat. Who's winning Super Bowl?
Well, Steven, first and foremost, it's a great day because as I look over my shoulder, again, if you're hearing this tomorrow or any time later on this week, as we are recording this live, the San Francisco 49ers are up, I think I just saw 34-7 over the Green Bay Packers, which is a fabulous score as a Vikings fan. The Chiefs. I'm taking Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs in the Super Bowl.
All right, give me the Niners. Anyway, there is our NFL chat. On today's show, Chicharito is coming to America. Adam Belz from the Scuffed Podcast, and Oliver Wyss, who is president and GM of Orange County Soccer Club, all on today's show. It is packed. We are live at Uncle Sam's Soccer Pod. Email us if that's the only means of communication. Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast at gmail.com. Send in your thoughts. And today's question of the day, which we'll get here in a minute, does the signing of Chicharito rival David Beckham's in 2007 as the most important in league history? So we'll get to that. Just wanted to put the question of the day out there. And Jake, MLS seems to be moving rather quickly. It was only a week ago you, me, and Armand sat here with Joseph Lowry breaking down some of the MLS offseason. And boy, in 7 days, quite a bit has changed.
Well, yeah, Steven, first and foremost, preseason camp has opened up for a lot of clubs this past week, or if they haven't, they're going to open up this week, which is crazy for me to think about that we're only a few short weeks away from MLS 2020, the 25th season in league history about to start, which is crazy to me. You've had some crazy rumors going around. You have SKC signing Pulido out of Liga MX. The Chicago Fire have been rumored to sign a couple of different players here with the was it Burrich? Is that his name? The video they use on Twitter where he's taking a shot of, I don't even know what the alcohol was.
I love that. Doesn't it seem like Chicago Fire are changing a little bit of what they're doing, or just even more generally speaking, MLS seems to realize that signings matter, and when you sign a player with some sort of weight behind his career, his name, do something special about it. Fans love it. It's easy social media content.
Well, I'm of the belief that anybody that's you can say is a DP is easy social media content, because let's be real, for the most part, unless it's, and we'll get to this in a second here, unless it's Chicharito, unless it's Zlatan, unless it's Carlos Vela, David Beckham, most of the time we have no idea who these DPs are. None of us have seen these guys. No one's really watching these players on the weekend. So you can say, hey, look at this DP we're signing. He's at this bar taking shots. Isn't this great? Welcome to Chicago Fire. It's super easy to make that content. It's super easy to say this guy's a DP, and you can get fans excited. You can get the media drawn up about it, and that's great for MLS, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And MLS CBA update, if you just Google MLS CBA, hit the news button, you got a Yahoo Sports article from 5 days ago, positive movement between the players and the owners. So we'll see with the CBA preseason signings. But, Jake, it has happened. Chicharito is coming to Major League Soccer. LA Galaxy have found their replacement for Zlatan Ibrahimovic in Javier Chicharito Hernandez. SI learned that LA will be paying Sevilla a transfer fee of $9.4 million, which is the same that Sevilla paid for West Ham. Or Sevilla paid West Ham for Chicharito last year. Chicharito's deal is a 3-year guaranteed contract with a ton of incentives. Grant Wall was told that his guaranteed annual salary will be around $6 million. So while Chicharito's incentives may cause him to take home more money than any other MLS player, his guaranteed money will come just below Carlos Vela and Josie Altidor's $6.3 million. So Chicharito will make money here in MLS. Now, question is, what does this mean for the league? There's a lot of hype, there's a lot of excitement, but this is not the first massive Mexican star. You had Carlos Vela already here in the same town. So let's get to this question of the day. Does the signing of Chicharito rival David Beckham's in 2007 as the most important in league history?
Well, Steven, let me tell you, I think it's close, but it's not on the same level. Now, as I stated on TikTok earlier this weekend, make sure you follow us on there at Uncle Sam Soccer Pod. Chicharito, he is a rock star amongst Mexican soccer fans. If you follow El Tri, if you follow the Mexican national team, you know who Chicharito is. He is a legend. With the signing of Chicharito by the LA Galaxy, that should bring more attention to the league. That should bring more eyeballs to the league. And I think for MLS, a league in which we'll be dealing with a TV rights deal over the next couple of years. They're going to be negotiating with networks. Who wants to broadcast MLS? Is it ESPN? Is it NBC? Is it maybe even CBS Sports Network? Whoever you may be. For a league, Fox, there you go, I forgot about Fox. For a league that has had TV ratings that are a bit down, if Chicharito can bring those numbers up, I think that is massive for the league, and that ultimately, I think that will be that'll help the trajectory of this league in terms of money spent. And I think there is an argument to be made that if all those things I just said play out, where you have a major boost in TV ratings, which will mean a major boost in TV revenue, you could argue, and I'm not saying it is, but you could argue that this signing is close, if not on the same level as David Beckham back in 2007.
Yeah, it's mixed, Jake. It's yes and no. I think David Beckham was the first. People are always going to be compared to David Beckham, and obviously what David Beckham did on the field, what he did for the league, how he grew the game internationally. Chicharito appeals to a different generation, a different fan base. It brings in that coveted Hispanic Mexican audience that MLS continues to go after and has struggled to go after. Yes, you have Carlos Vela. Yes, you have Dos Santos. But Chicharito was arguably, for the first half of last decade, the most important North American player. Because he played, at the time, the biggest club in the world in Manchester United. He was phenomenal with Manchester United. He scored a lot of important goals in the Premier League, 158 games. This is his Premier League put together entirely. 53 goals, 16 assists. And then in the Bundesliga, Jake, he was pretty damn good too. 54 games, 28 goals, and 6 assists. Now, I don't think he's necessarily going to put the same output, the same production as Ibrahimovic. Well, I think Ibrahimovic is just on a different level. However, this is much-watched football now. This is a much-watched team. Just like Ibrahimovic is, different audience, but this is much watch. I can't wait to watch Chicharito out there and play for the Galaxy. And hopefully the Galaxy can put a team together that will be successful on the field just as much as they will be off the field.
Now, Steven, I did no research into what I'm about to say here next, okay? So this is kind of for bleeps and giggles, okay? I stated to you this last night. the LA Galaxy and LAFC will play each other later this May on ABC. Okay, that's network TV. That's big boy TV there for those who don't know what ABC is. And what did I tell you last night? I said El Tráfico in May will be the most watched regular season MLS match of all time. You have Chicharito, you have Carlos Vela, you have these two teams that every time they get together, something crazy happens in the Galaxy and LAFC. You have
but I don't think it's going to be the same. Here's why El Tráfico was so sexy this past year. Is the fact that Ibrahimovic was a punk. Okay, he called out Carlos Vela. The LAFC never beat the Galaxy, so you no longer have that. This is going to take a different tune. Now, Chicharito and Carlos Vela, they're different characters within the Mexican national team. One is more liked than the other, but the way they are perceived with Mexicans is rather unique. And hopefully this is something we can get more in depth later on into as the weeks come by. But I just don't think it takes the same flavor. This will absolutely, I think, get more of an audience, yes, but it's not going to have the same hatred that you felt watching El Tráfico this past year.
Not the first time around, but there is this animosity by both sides against one another. And I think that with Chicharito added to this drama, if you will, with LA Galaxy and LAFC, you're going to add a completely new audience, aka the Mexican soccer fan that didn't give a damn about MLS. I think that this will be a massive ratings boost. You have these two mega stars for Mexico. You have Vela, you have Chicharito. I think that just makes for a compelling match, and hopefully someone wants to play the villain a la Zlatan Ibrahimovic and grabs that by the scruff of the neck and runs with it. I really do believe that this match,
the villain role, it is so hard to play the villain role.
We'll have to wait and see, but I really believe this match will be one of the most watched matches of MLS.
I'm just saying, don't expect the same buzz. It's going to be a different buzz. It might be even a bigger buzz. That's fine. I'm just saying, you just felt that the Galaxy and LAFC didn't like each other. What's the intent? What is that going to be this time around? Will there be more respect for each other? Will it just be, hey, I respect you, we're competitors, but that's it? What is that intensity going to be? Anyway, here's Hercules Gomez on the meaning of the signing.
Zlatan had a cultural significance, and everybody around the world, regardless of your nationality, knows Zlatan. And Zlatan, honestly, if we could say, if it wasn't for Cristiano or Messi, many would have called probably the best on the planet, easily. Chicharito's not in that ballpark. But Chicharito, here, on this side of the hemisphere, here, in this market in Los Angeles, blows Zlatan out of the water. And listen to what I'm saying. The market here in California for Chicharito is greater significance than any other player besides David Beckham. David Beckham, you throw him in anywhere, is David Beckham. And he's the most important signing in the history of the league. And he's the before and after. He's the party of the waters. Mm-hmm. You can't convince me anything otherwise. There would be no...
BCAD.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Chicharito is this as close as this gets.
So there's Gomez on Extra Time Radio. Jake, do you agree with his assertion? It is hard for me to compare David Beckham because, God, David Beckham was such a long time ago. And I'll be honest, it's kind of... I was a little bit young at the time.
A little before your time.
A little bit before my time. Let's just put it out there. But this is a significant signing. Ibrahimovic, Chicharito, different names. One better player than the other, but it just has a different impact on this league.
No, you're right. And like Hercules Gomez said there, the Chicharito signing on this side of the hemisphere, aka the Western Hemisphere, on this continent, North America, is massive. compared to Zlatan Ibrahimovic. He essentially says that the only signing that's bigger than Javier Hernandez, Chicharito, would be David Beckham. So I think that just puts into context just how big of a signing Chicharito is for MLS. Like I said, I can't imagine how many more eyeballs, how much more attention is going to be drawn to this league now that Chicharito has decided to sign with the Galaxy. And I'm quite frankly excited as an MLS fan. The only question I have, and we've kind of hinted about this about with the LA Galaxy and the LAFC talk, is how is he going to fill in for Zlatan Ibrahimovic? And Herculez Gomez also talks about how Chicharito can fill in for Zlatan's shoes.
In a market where they're playing second fiddle. And this is a former Galaxy player that's telling you that they're playing second fiddle. Alejandro Moreno, former Galaxy striker, will tell you the same thing. I live in this city. I work downtown, centrally located. The guerrilla marketing theme that they've done, the be with LAFC, it's cool, it's hip, it's swag, it's a brand new thing. Look at the bells and whistle, look at our stadium, look at our players, look at our best player in the league. Mm-hmm. It's working. And there's been a divide, and slowly but surely, this LAFC team is taking over. The Galaxy needed this. They needed this on the field because who's going to replace the Zlatan goals? And they needed this off the field. Who's going to create that buzz? It's Chicharito. He's the most important signing for them, obviously. No question about it. And he may be even more important than Zlatan in a lot of factors.
It'll be interesting to see how it works on the field. It's something we'll actually explore more as a show in the coming weeks. This is just... let's look at it off the field. What is the impact of this Chicharito signing? And listeners, question of the day. And let us know. We've had multiple responses throughout the week today about this signing. Does the signing of Chicharito rival David Beckham's in 2007 as the most important in league history? Herculez Gomez on Extra Time Radio said so. Do you agree? It is very interesting. It's a back and forth debate. And quite frankly, Jake, it seems like if Chicharito goes on and wins with the Galaxy, then it would be hard to argue no. But if he doesn't, it'll be an interesting hindsight 2020 game to play with the DP signings of Ibrahimovic and Chicharito back-to-back. And frankly, this is excellent for MLS because you needed the Galaxy to be relevant. You needed a team to be competitive when you have LAFC running away with the supporter shield last year.
Right, and like Herc said in that little soundbite, the last one we just played, LAFC have really taken over that marketplace in LA and have really done a good job of converting Galaxy fans to LAFC fans and have really got people excited about LAFC, and it almost feels as though the Galaxy are playing second fiddle. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the coming weeks and months as MLS gets ready to kick off. And speaking of kickoff, we have an interview with Adam Belz of the Scuffed Podcast that we want to kick off for you that we recorded earlier this week on Wednesday, January 15th. We talk a little U.S. men's national team with the hiring of Brian McBride. We talk a little youth national team.
Olympic soccer.
We're super excited for you guys to hear that. And we are going to play that for you actually right now. So without further ado, Adam Belz.
Wait. Just to let you know, listeners, we recorded this January 15th. Jake was on the phone, was in front of his mic. And we did talk about a couple of internationals, Jake, that did make their senior team debuts, respectively, this past weekend.
That's right. Indiana Vasilev, age 18, made his club debut, his senior team debut for Aston Villa. And also Gio Reyna, age 17. I believe he is younger than Christian Pulisic when he made his debut for Borussia Dortmund. Both of them made their debuts this weekend for their senior club. So that's something that is just very exciting if you're a U.S. men's national team fan. I'm sure they should be making appearances with the senior team maybe even as soon as March. So,
yeah, Here we go. Here's our chat with Adam Belz of the Scuffed Podcast.
Joining us now on the show is the co-host of the Scuffed Podcast. It's Adam Belz. You can follow Adam on Twitter at ZlebMata. Adam, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm pretty good. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. And before we get into the McBride youth coaching and the Olympics chat, I just wanted to get your thoughts on this January training camp. We've had rather mixed opinion here on our show. What's it like with you?
I guess I'm happy to see some young players get a chance. It seems like a low stakes January camp. There's no reason not to experiment, is my view on it. So I'm happy to see Hernandez there and who else? Brian Cahill, even really young guy. Mark McKenzie, Justin Glad. I mean, it's a bunch of guys, right, who are not likely to be playing with the senior national team anytime soon. So it's great to get them in the system, get them learning about it. And maybe get them ready to join the U23s, for Olympic qualifying.
Yeah. So what excites you? What's one name that excites you most?
Oh, well, Giannis, of course. I mean, I think he's a super exciting attacking winger. We don't have a lot of those, with his sort of creativity and sauce from wide. And I know he's a ways out. He's a ways out from probably being, playing in a World Cup qualifier. But things can change fast in this game, right? He could be breaking in at Wolfsburg sometime soon. We don't know, and then all of a sudden he's moves to the top of the winger depth chart or near the top of it. So it's good, I think, to let him know he's part of the family, get him indoctrinated in Berhalter ball, and get that process going.
Now, Adam, on the last show, we talked about, the McBride hire as the U.S. men's national team GM. We all had a lot of mixed opinions on that, but earlier this week on Monday, we got some more answers with the Ernie Stewart and Brian McBride conference call. Now, you were on that call, I believe. What was your initial impressions and takeaways from that?
My initial impression was that Ernie Stewart sees the job primarily as one of relationship building with clubs, and then the rest of it, helping to foster a good culture in the men's national team and aligning the men's national team with the youth national teams, which is something that I think is very important. That all seemed a little bit fuzzier to me, and it wasn't compellingly expressed so much. I guess that's my opinion. Does that answer the question?
Well, I was of the notion, actually, I was reading into what Craig Burley of ESPN FC said before the conference call, saying that McBride is a genuine guy, he's very respectable, he's good at communications, and I thought, okay, as a GM, you're going to need to be communicating to coaches, to players, to clubs. For a while, there's been this assertion that the relationship between the federation and especially dual nationals is at very best fractured. So I think he could provide some way forward for dual nationals, but even just any American to establish a relationship that is good and well firm for the federation and players and clubs.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. That was another thing that stuck out to me in the conference call was McBride said it's definitely part of the job description to build relationships with dual nationals. So it's a necessity to build early relationships with the players and their parents, which is kind of a far cry from Thomas Rongen claiming erroneously that he visited Jonathan Gonzalez's house in 2017.
Right.
So hopefully we make some real progress on that front. McBride sounds, everybody likes McBride. I love McBride.
Mm-hmm.
He seems like a genuine guy. He was a warrior at the 9. He played the way we want our players to play. And I found myself agreeing with a lot of what he said as an ESPN analyst too. So I took him at his word, and I think that's an encouraging message to get from him.
One thing that everyone was curious about was McBride's power to hire and fire the coach. And Ernie Stewart told reporters on the conference call on Monday, hiring and firing by one person is not something we want to govern within the organization. Brian will be responsible for that, and we'll obviously have discussions about that. Brian will lead that. If needed, we will act. Now, do you foresee McBride actually having the power to make a call on Greg Berhalter's head, or does this hire? I mean, to me, it almost feels like McBride was hired as like a shield from Ernie Stewart and Jay Berhalter. Like, what are your takes on that? Do you think he's going to have any, let's say 6 months on the road, if he says this isn't a good hire, we need to move on? Do you think he's going to have the power to make that move?
I think it's going to be neither one nor the other. It's going to be complicated. So there's two ways to take it. McBride is hired as a shield for Stewart, and I mean maybe that's true to some extent. Another way to look at it is, Cordero was hired, or was not hired. He was elected as president on a mandate of more of like a consensus building, decision by consensus. At least the way I read it, as a reaction to the Sunil Gulati years, when Gulati was like, he was essentially a dictator, maybe a benevolent dictator, but it was him and and Flynn,
right?
And he and Flynn making the decisions on their own. A classic example of this is, they wanted to fire Jurgen Klinsmann, but Flynn, I forget Flynn's first name. Do you guys have that off the top of your heads? Anyways, the former CEO Flynn, he had to have heart surgery, and so he was out of commission. And as a result, they didn't make the decision because the whole thing rode on two guys, Gulati and Flynn. And then they didn't fire Klinsmann. I think this was after, like right before the Copa America or after the Copa America. And then of course, things got worse with Klinsmann in the beginning of World Cup qualifying in the last cycle. And then they had to fire him sort of at the 11th hour. And, so that's like the classic example of two guys having too much power. And I think Cordero and probably all the people who have been hired since are operating under, an intentional idea of we're gonna do things by consensus. There isn't gonna all ride on one person. And I think, as an abstract idea, that's a good thing. That's my opinion, at least. It's better to have a system and a structure for these kinds of decisions than it is to have it just be like one guy resting all on one guy's whims.
Yeah, and it's his first name is Dan.
Dan, that's right.
Dan,
yeah.
There you go. So, but what I find really interesting is what I really question is whether or not Greg Berhalter, now with McBride, who was working in the media, had an ear more so to the public, obviously way more engaged with the public, obviously with the show on ESPN FC. I wonder if that puts a little more pressure on Greg Berhalter. It will be one of those things that we just have to wait and see. Now, I want to move on. We all know of the Twitter reaction to the coaching vacancies within the youth ranks of U.S. soccer over the last several weeks. The Federation just did hire Gonzalo, and I'm going to butcher this, Cigars, as the U15 boys national team head coach. SBI Soccer reported that FC Cincinnati Director of Player Development, Larry Sunderland, was expected to be hired as the U.S. U17 national team coach, but according to Paul Tonario and Sam Skasko of The Athletic, Sunderland had not spoken with the Federation about the new job. Now, what was rather confusing is the fact that multiple MLS teams have turned down requests by USSF to interview candidates for the open youth national team position, and this is again in the piece written by Paul Tonario and Sam Skasko. That includes DC United assistant coach Nolan Sheldon, who was a candidate for the Open U20 national team coach that eventually went to former Colorado Rapids coach Anthony Hudson. But let me ask you, what's your impression with the hires in the youth national team setting?
I have to be honest, I don't really know that much about Cigares, but I see the reaction is positive. It's positive among people I trust. It's good to have. I think it's important and good to have an Hispanic coach in the youth national team ranks, and someone who speaks Spanish as a first language. those all seem like positive things to me. But I don't know. I don't know if he's a good coach or not. That's sort of beyond me.
Right.
The other coach, Anthony Hudson, who was hired to be the U20 coach a couple weeks ago, I guess. He, the reaction to that among people I trust was like overwhelmingly negative. He, as we all know, he had a really rough time in Colorado. He called his players a bottom level group in some quotes like just a few days before he was sacked. It's hard to get excited about him. I guess the only, the bone I would throw to the Federation on this is it might be hard to hire people for these jobs. The Chicago requirement, which gets so much discussion, the requirement that coaches live in Chicago is probably an obstacle for some people. It certainly is for some. It's been reported that some people turned down youth national team jobs. Eric Quill in your guys' neck of the woods apparently turned down an offer for one of the jobs. And then it was reported by Tenorio and Stay School that MLS franchises were not letting their assistant coaches speak with USSF, which, that's a bummer. But so I guess Hudson doesn't seem like a great choice to me, but on the other hand, he wasn't the first choice. We know that now because of people's reporting. And I guess I'm willing to, give him a mulligan on that, and we'll see how he does,
When talking about all these rules and regulations to get one of these youth national team jobs, like you said, there's the Chicago requirement. You're a media member, but you're also a fan of this federation. What does that say to you that, like you just said, Anthony Hudson wasn't their first choice, and there's all these hurdles that this federation has to go through just to get somebody to want to take the job, like relocating to Chicago. Are you at all confident in this federation going forward?
Well, first of all, I like Chicago. I think Chicago's a great city. It's fantastic.
It is fun. It's a massive city, though.
It's huge, and it is cold in the winter, but it's not as cold as where I live, Minneapolis. And so yeah, I don't know. I understand that people have families and they have lives. Their partners have lives, their kids have lives, and they're not just gonna move somewhere, for a job that might last 1 or 2 years. But I don't think Chicago is like this horrible place that, nobody should be expected to live in. I just want to say that as a Midwesterner. Do I have confidence in the Federation in what respect?
I look at Anthony Hudson and think, what is in his background that suggests he's a good development coach? You know what I mean? Like what makes him qualified to manage the U20s and help cultivate the talent for the senior national team? And when you're, left, I guess, for lack of a better word, scraping the bottom of the barrel, I just think that fans, when they read stuff like that or hear stuff like that, shouldn't be very confident in this federation to put a good product out on the field over the next couple of years, especially as it relates to the 2022 World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dumb cliche, but I think it's really true. It's all going to be about results. And if Hudson can do well in World Cup qualifying and make a good showing at the U20 World Cup, all will be forgiven. I think he has. You could make an argument that what he did with the New Zealand U20s back in, I think it was in 2015, was worthy of some praise. I think on the other hand, look at Rafa Wicki. I was pleased. He seemed like he was overqualified for the job, and a lot of us were pleased with the way he had the U17s playing in qualifying last May. They played some beautiful soccer. They dominated Mexico in the first half, even though they couldn't put the ball in the back of the net, and then they ended up losing in extra time. So a lot of us were feeling really good about them. And then, they totally, as we all know, that team totally laid an egg at the World Cup. They looked like they didn't even belong on the field for big portions of that tournament. And so now now everybody says, well, Wicki was a bad hire. I don't know. It's like, I think a lot of this stuff is a crapshoot. I just hope Hudson is hungry to prove himself, and I'm sure he is. and that he's getting, that there's going to be some alignment between the system and the senior team and the senior with the system with the U20s. And if he can execute that stuff and get some decent results, it's not the end of the world. It's going to be fine.
Right. And what's interesting with the Wiki hire from the Chicago Fire perspective, somebody close to the situation said that he had offers in Europe. So it wasn't one of those things that he took Chicago Fire out of a job out of necessity, or if U.S. Soccer pushed him out, or he had offers here in MLS. He had offers in Europe. So I thought he did reasonably well with the U17 national team. But I guess as you mentioned, it's all about results, and ultimately that's how we're going to judge Greg Berhalter. If he's going to try to implement a very difficult system when he has limited time with his players and doesn't get the results, does it really matter that they play beautifully and lose 3-0? Or is it better to win ugly and move and progress, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, that's an age-old question, isn't it? I do think if Hudson has bad results and say our U23s don't qualify for the Olympics, then Ernie Stewart's going to come under some really justified criticism, because these vacancies have been present for so long, and the Wiki was hired like 2 months before World Cup qualifying. Now Hudson is being hired 6 months before World Cup qualifying, not giving these guys a lot of lead time. I don't know. I know I said earlier in the conversation that it may be difficult to hire people for these jobs, but on the other hand, that's the job. That's Ernie Stewart's job. He's got to fill these positions, and it doesn't feel like it's been a very efficient process. And if the results suffer or continue to suffer, there's going to be good reason to hold him accountable for that.
Now, Adam, you just mentioned the Olympics. I was listening to your show a couple of days ago, and you guys were talking about Olympic qualifying and that whole thing, and I believe you were the co-host, essentially stated, well, we don't know the rosters yet, so you don't want to really talk about prognostication, making predictions about Olympic qualifying. But I'm going to put you on the spot, and I'm going to ask you to make a prediction, or at least give us a percentage chance that you would give the U.S. to qualify for Tokyo later this summer.
50-50. I don't know. I'm not super confident. We're in a tough group with Mexico and wait, is it Mexico, Costa Rica, and the Dominican Republic?
That sounds right.
Yeah, it is. And so that's tough. There's definitely 2 losable games there, and who knows what this roster is going to be. It's a real mess. It's really hard to predict, because like Ulianes was allowed by Wolfsburg to come to January camp, despite the fact that Wolfsburg had a first team camp and their U19s are picking up right at the beginning of February. That is often not the case. Clubs in Europe often do not release players outside of international windows, and so that eliminates a huge part of the player pool. So now we're looking at just MLS U23s, and I don't know how we're going to do in that tournament. I wouldn't be surprised if we did well. I wouldn't be surprised if we did poorly.
Are you concerned that some player?
Is Jason Price going to remain the coach? Do you guys know?
No idea. I mean, that's a good question. I mean, we might even have a coaching carousel dilemma going on just before the Olympics if they qualify. And I also wonder if some of the top young players want to play for the Olympic team.
Yeah, I mean, some of them do for sure, right? They want to play in the Olympics. I know. I mean, if I were a 21-year-old with a chance to play at the Summer Olympics for my country, I'd want to do it. And I think I read that Pulisic would like to do it if Chelsea allow him to. And if you want to feel excited, you can look at like what a potential U23 lineup would look like, and it's a lot of our best players. It's a lot of our best senior national team players would be are eligible to play in the Olympics, even without the age exception. So that's an exciting thing,
right? Well, what's interesting, the Washington Post just had a story by the Associated Press with the headline "Young U.S. men's players uncertain for Olympic soccer," and we'll have to let you go after this last thought. But it opens up with the U.S. qualifiers for this year's Olympics men's soccer tournament. It might decide that Christian Pulisic is better off remaining with Chelsea than going to Tokyo. And I guess this I don't know where this is coming from, but I'm just curious to know, as we build towards the end of the season for a lot of these European-based players, the young ones, Sargents, Pulisic, Adams, Sardinio Des, whether or not they will want to play for the Olympic team, whether or not the clubs want to, or even the federation say, look, we got World Cup qualifying, we don't want you to get hurt.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fair question. I think, and I kind of go back and forth on it. Brian Sciaretta, I think he's been on your guys' show before. He argues the Olympics are super important for getting the country excited about the men's national team. And I think there's some merit to that perspective. Is it so important that you risk somebody getting injured before World Cup qualifying? I don't know, man. That's above my pay grade. What do you guys think?
I guess I would just like to see them qualify for the Olympics. I mean, how many Olympics have they missed? The last two cycles? Yeah, I think that if you want the senior national team to be a winning product, I think that has to start at the youth ranks. And I know there are some people who look at what happened in the U17 World Cup last year. I believe it was the U17, not the U20. Whatever age group it was. There were some people who said, "Well, the winning doesn't really matter. You just want to make sure these kids are being developed." And to me, it's kind of a two-faced there. I think you need to develop, but you also need to teach these kids how to win. So when they're brought up to that senior national team, they know how to win or what it takes to win, or they've faced some adversity instead of, well, we're being developed, but we when we get in these cup competitions, we're out in the group stages or whatever that may be. We don't know what it takes to make a long run. So that's kind of my take on that whole thing. But
yeah,
Adam,
it's a tough question.
It's definitely a tough question, but we appreciate your time here today. We love the show. Keep up the good work with that. Is there? Thank you. We appreciate that. Is there? Before we let you go, anything else you'd like to add? Anything else you'd like to plug away? The floor is yours.
No, I mean, I do have one thing to add. I think the big picture, despite all the coaching carousels and the uncertainty in the federation, I still think the big picture is, and this is like sort of a driving motivation of our podcast, that there are a lot more young, talented players than there were, 5 years ago. And you can even look at all the youngsters doing first team training in winter camps just this month. Chris Richards, Richie Ledesma, Gio Reyna, Nick Taitegui. These are guys who we're not necessarily counting on in the next few months breaking in. Any of them could, and probably more than one will. And that's just unlike it's been for many, many years. And that's not to mention Tyler Adams, Christian Pulisic, Weston McKennie, Josh Sargent, Tim Weah. Throw Paxton Pomacall in there. These are Serginho Dest. These are players all under 21 or under who are the core of the future, and they're the core of the present too. They're the best players on the team, and that's a really positive thing. I think things are moving gradually in the right direction, and whether we're hiring the right coaches at the right times is an issue, and it needs to be discussed. But it's not gonna stop that overall positive momentum.
Well, we really appreciate it, Adam. Love to have you back on and sometime soon, especially I guess if we do qualify for the Olympics or if something drastic happens, who knows. Love to have you back on. But listeners, check out the Scuffed Podcast. It's a wonderful listen. And Adam, thanks again.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Alrighty, there you got it. Your weekly dose of U.S. men's national team chat. There you had it with Adam Belz of the Scuffed Podcast. And Jake, we're going to have to turn this around rather quickly because we got to get to our Oliver Wyss interview. And that is also a good listen. But Jake, these youngsters making their debut this past weekend, do you feel like it's with the U.S. men's national team, it's on the up?
I don't know, Steven. It's hard to say because I feel as though a year ago, we thought that the national team was on the up with the likes of Josh Sargent, Timothy Weah. I think you can go and say Tyler Adams. I constantly feel like, at least for the last couple of years, we've looked at the U.S. men's national team or the U.S. men's youth national team and thought, hey, in a couple of years, this should be a good thing. You have all these young players. This should be fun. These guys should develop. And like we said before the interview, Indiana Vassilev made his debut for Aston Villa earlier this weekend, as well as Gio Reyna with Borussia Dortmund. Both of those guys with Vassilev at 18 years old and Reyna at 17 years old. It's easy to look at those two and envision, wow, these guys might be the next big thing. Gio Reyna might be the next Christian Pulisic in terms of talent, or just a guy you can look at the U.S. men's national team and just plug him in and think, here's the guy for the next 8-10 years, and it's easy to envision that in your mind. But youth development is weird, man. I mean, who knows? 3 years from now, Gio Reyna could be a nobody. He could be back in MLS. Who knows?
That's the thing. Look, we can't. It's very easy to overhype these kids, and sometimes I sit there and say, just put the pause button. Like, this is good. They get playing time, but my goodness, by the time they turn 22, 23, the narrative can be completely shifted on some of these players, and who knows what's going to happen. But Jake, let's get to Oliver Wyss. He's the president and GM of Orange County Soccer Club, and boy, this was a fun interview. We talked about youth development. We talked about how Orange County is different than any of the other clubs in America. We talked about the Rangers partnership. It's a fun interview. We talk about business development, allowing players to play. You don't want to miss it. It's coming up right now.
Joining us now on the show is General Manager and President of Soccer Operations for Orange County SC. It's Oliver Wyss. Oliver, how are you doing today?
Great, gentlemen. Thanks for having me on the show. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a fellow Swiss, I'm most excited. But Oliver, let's begin with your roots. You were born in Switzerland, where your soccer career began with FC Solothurn. By 15, you were playing professional soccer for FC Solothurn in the Swiss First Division. You had played more than 20 international games for the Swiss youth national team, including European Cup qualifiers. From personal experience, I know the Swiss have made great changes to youth development in the last couple decades. But that said, what was your experience growing up as a soccer player?
Well, growing up in Switzerland, I think there's a system that is clearly defined. You play for your local team. You start with the youngest youth level, and your goal is to play for the first team. And you have that pathway that is fully lined out for you, and you follow. And obviously, if you have a great career from a smaller club, you ultimately want to end up for one of the bigger clubs in Switzerland and hopefully beyond. And if you get a chance to represent your national team, then that's even better. And I think that being said, I had a very good education in Switzerland, very, very good coaches. Was fortunate enough to be part of the youth national team system and got to play all around Europe. And I think that gave me a foundation that I use even nowadays today with, obviously, as we discussed a little bit later, the pathway we want to create at Orange County Soccer Club, and basically are doing it now on all fronts.
Now, Oliver, you just mentioned it, but how specifically did that experience, with that youth setup, impact you now, especially now that you're the president of soccer ops at Orange County SC?
Well, I think it gives me a good understanding how to develop players, because I've gone through it myself as a player and then as a coach, and understand, what is expected and how much it actually takes to build that. So I think that's definitely the foundation of my beliefs, is what I learned in Europe, and basically which stands for almost every, country in Europe who develops players. And the one thing that was clearly stood out when I came to the United States in '94 was the amount of talented youth players there were in the United States who simply did not have a pathway that what we had in Europe. And by able to create that, I think it's not a question of how good this country can be, but it's really how do we develop these players and give them the opportunity, especially at a younger age, to be part of a professional setup and maximize their potentials.
Now, Oliver, I want to fast forward a little bit. You've been in Southern California since you made the move to the Los Angeles Salsa in 1994. You were the director of the West Coast FC Boys program, a program in which saw a lot of success under your leadership, winning 3 U.S. Youth Soccer National Championships, and in addition, various league championships, league cups, and national and state cups. We hear all the time the talent that resides in Southern California and how good it is. Why do you think the talent there may be more exceptional than other parts of the country?
Well, obviously, there's a lot of players playing first and foremost. Alone in Cal South, we have over 200,000 registered players, and I'm sure there's a lot of unregistered players as well. And I think, there's always been talent here. Obviously, we have 11 months of sunshine. I think that kind of helps in development. And it was clearly that, there's a lot of influence of Latin players. I mean, let's face it, the border's right down the street, right? There's a lot of South Americans, but also Europeans that live in Southern California. And it's a big soccer market that historically has produced some of the best players in the United States. But it's also kind of fallen off in the last few years. And I think it's basically been due that youth soccer has turned more into a business than actually into player development. And more importantly, specifically in Orange County, there was never a professional team that really has seriously looked at developing these talented players. And the key to developing players is, I feel, as it is anywhere else in the world, and we actually feel as an organization, is to get the most talented players into a professional environment so that the most talented 15, 16, 17-year-olds are not playing in their own age brackets and stagnate, but truly be challenged in a professional environment where they're trained by professional coaches every day and learn from other great professional players the trade of being a soccer player on and off the field.
Now, Oliver, you just alluded to some of the things that Orange County is doing to overcome those challenges, but how are you setting yourself apart from LAFC, LA Galaxy, the other clubs across the country, whether that be MLS or USL?
Well, I think you have to have a clear vision as an organization. And I think as we always believed into the youth soccer market, it became very clear when James Keston bought the team 3.5 years ago and rebranded it, that he truly believed in the talented local soccer market and that we were going to develop these players through a professional team while still obviously competing for USL championships. I think the MLS is a different model, right? The MLS has a single identity league. It might not be as easy to develop players and sell them on when they're ready to be sold on. And I think it's clearly said that the MLS coach obviously is probably more judged on winning an MLS championship than probably developing young players that move on. Now in the USL, again, we control the player rights, so we can do business as every other club in the world. And we want to win championships as well too, but for our business model, it's also very important to have an entire organization that starts with a technical director and a head coach that truly believe that while we want to win championships, we're also developing young players and give these young players the opportunity to play if they deserve to play in a very, very competitive USL championship that will develop them for the next level.
Now, Oliver, the one thing that kind of caught my eye when obviously this was earlier, or I guess last year, when finding out about Orange County, was when you guys, signed those youth internationals, and them, going from academies to this USL team. How have you guys established those relationships with those youth players to ensure that, hey, like, you'll be given a chance to play, develop, and when you want to leave, you know what, we'll let you go. We won't hold you back. How have you guys established those kinds of relationships, in able to have those signings come through?
Well, I think part of it is relationships, and part of it is people are starting to watch and look for these opportunities. And I think we have actually done what we said we were going to do. And when we signed Aaron Cervantes over 2 years ago when he was 15 years old, and the first year he didn't play because he had to develop and grow, especially as a goalkeeper. It's a very tough position for a young player to get in there. But last year he made 12 starts for us, and he played really, really well, and he was prepared accordingly because he was put in an environment to succeed and not to fail. We have a very, very good staff. Obviously, as I said, starting with our technical director, Franz Hoog, who's been on the absolutely highest level on the top clubs in the world, and they developed many top players. And in Braden Cloutier, who's a very good coach, but has also worked on the youth level, understands where these players are coming from, into a full system of assistant coaches and talent managers that work on a daily basis. And the fact that Aaron did so well and got himself through his games back into the youth national teams and was part of the team that went to the World Cup, I think it opened up the doors to these other young players that wanted to come be part of it, including Diego Lopez, who's a local player that we actually wanted to sign at the same time. We signed Aaron, but at that time the MLS route through Atlanta was probably more established on paper. And then he realized that he wanted to come back because his opportunities to play for the MLS team were probably small, where he realized if he comes here and he's being developed, that he will have the opportunity to play for us and go on to the next level. And so that we with Brian Caio, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more, who's been now called up into the first U.S. national team camp for the senior team, which is an amazing tribute to the USL, and it's proof that our pathway works. And then obviously with an incredibly young talent in Francis Jacobs, who we signed as a 14-year-old, who is now making waves internationally. So I think we want to be different, and we believe in these players, but these players also need to earn the right to play. Just because they're young, that doesn't mean they're going to get playing, because as I said, we have also a list of veteran players that have played on the absolutely highest level that are role models for these players, but very clearly we also want to win a championship. So finding the ideal balance between being competitive, competing for championships, but also develop players is the one thing that we work on daily. And I think we found a good model that we are continually developing and put a quality team on the field.
Now, Oliver, let me ask you about the business aspect, because here in America, across American sports, it's all about making as much money as you possibly can, whether it's the NBA, the NFL, MLB, NHL. Now, MLS is trying to do that, but there's a lot of criticism from foreign players saying that model doesn't work. How's Orange County balancing that when you, as you alluded to just now, developing youth, giving them opportunity, also competing for trophies, but then there's the business aspect of allowing these players to move on into bigger clubs?
Well, look, first and foremost, in the USL Championship, we don't want to be the MPs of a young, talented player. We just feel we can be a very important piece in development of the player that hopefully will go on and play on the absolutely highest level here and then represent our U.S. national team. You have to look at these young players as anywhere else in the world. They're assets when we talk from a financial aspect and how to develop these assets. So you got to have an environment where you continually develop these players, because signing talented players and then they never play doesn't do you any good either, right? And I think that's kind of what happened probably in the MLS, because they have a lot of young talented players, but it was very hard to integrate them too in an ever-evolving MLS level of play that makes it more difficult for these young players to play. And in the USL Championship, the level is evolving as well too, but again, this is a model and an environment that we started over 3 years ago, and we spent a lot of time and effort and financial resources into really building this one out. And we feel now we have that environment where a young player can compete, learn in a daily environment that is top-notch on every single aspect, and then given the opportunity to play and move on. As I said, for us, the business models, we want to tap into global transfer market that I think last year was over $5 billion. So I think it's hard to understand that the USA in general has some of the most young talented players. Is not a bigger player in that market, right? But we believe by changing that a little bit and producing these young players and move them on, and naturally not moving them on a high transfer fee, as maybe some in the MLS, they're asking for high transfer fees, where we are more about, hey, let's find the right partner where we can move these players on for some kind of money, but not a massive transfer fee, but then keep future transfer rights. Because as you guys know, in soccer, it's not the first transfer that is really the most lucrative. It's really the second and third transfer. And if we can be part of that and get something back for our investment, then I think this model will work.
So, Oliver, when you say being in part of that second and third investment, are you referring to sell-on fees there? Is that something that you like to, if you're agreeing to sell a player to a club, let's just say in Europe, when you make that agreement, do you also have a clause written in there that says we're going to get 20% or 30% or whatever it may be of the sale?
Absolutely, yes. And that's why it was so important for us to find the ideal international partner like Glasgow Rangers, who actually is all in there where they're developing these players as well too, because it's going to be a great sign if some of our young players can make the Glasgow Rangers team. But imagine if a player makes the Glasgow Rangers teams and then from there moves on to even a bigger club. And obviously Glasgow Rangers by itself is a massive club now that competes for trophies in Europe and back in the Europa League. So I think you realize now if a player from there goes and we have secondary transfer or third transfers, that then these transfers become significant in amounts that ultimately will offset and give big returns to our organization.
Now, you just talked about it. It's like you also have our questions in front of you, Oliver. You recently announced that partnership with Rangers. How did that all come together?
Well, I think for the last 2 or 3 years, we have been always looking for the proper and the right international partner that truly believes in the talent market in Southern California, but that would be truly building a partnership that works for both sides. And the essence has to be soccer, right? Player development. And we have been approached by multiple clubs around the world. Some clubs that compete in the Champions League and some clubs that play in the Bundesliga who believe in these markets. But it was very clear from the moment where we stepped into the Glasgow Rangers facilities and met with their ownership group and had the chance to see how Steven Gerrard works with his group and how the academy is set up, which is now one of the best academies in Europe, that we knew immediately this was one of an ideal partner for us. And when they came over and analyzed what we have at Orange County Soccer Club and what we're doing, it was clear that this was a perfect match. So this came over many, many years, but really when Rangers came along, it was clear that this was the club that would be the ideal partner we have been looking for.
So let me just ask you a clarification question. Were you guys approached by other European clubs, or were you guys actively seeking clubs, and then you had time to analyze everything and you ultimately landed on Rangers?
It was a combination of both. Obviously, as a European and having other Europeans in the organization, we've had some very good contacts with people who run organizations, and we were kind of gauging their interest, but we also what we have been doing and obviously made it very clear our intention. We've got actually some very good interest from European clubs that reached out to us directly, engaged our interest, and I think that's the beauty and the growth of the USL, and I think soccer in general. I mean, nowadays when you go to the international tournaments that are being played in the United States, you see many European teams and scouts that are looking for players because they still know that most of these players they can grab for free, right? Which wouldn't happen in Europe with obviously training compensation and then solidarity payments. So the European top clubs are very much engaged and have been for a while in the American market, and so for us to have an official partner was obviously definitely the right choice.
What would you say the ultimate goal for the club is with this partnership? It looks like Orange County has a number of players working with Rangers and their academy. Would you just say the ultimate goal here is just to get more exposure for your players over in Europe, and then maybe you can sell these guys on to Rangers or other European clubs?
Well, it's going to be a very comprehensive partnership, which it starts obviously with player movement. So for your information, yes, we had 3 of our most talented young internationals were over there during the holiday break, and they played with their academy teams and did really well, and will continue to go over there with the hope, obviously, that one of the players will move there and continue his development pathway. But it's also for Rangers. They were actually sending us top young talents that will be playing for us in the USL Championship that are maybe not ready yet to play for their first team, but are already on first team contracts. So really from a player movement, it will go both ways, because not only will we expose these players now from Rangers in the USL Championship to a different market, be it the MLS or Mexico or South America, but it will really go both ways. And then from a coaching perspective, we want to implement the Rangers methodology and the way they develop players into our structure as well too. And that will also include coaching exchanges where Rangers coaches will be working with our staff with the goal to have one or two of them actually join us permanently, for our staff to be over there, learn from Steven Gerrard and his staff how they do business and continue to grow and develop. And then add commercial aspects to it, where Rangers will bring the first team and do a pre-season tour, play against us in Orange County and other teams, do international tournaments together, and really build out a partnership that is beneficial for both parties. As you know, Rangers have a massive following in North America and Canada, and to kind of tap into that market by having some of her top players play for us, I think will also bring in a new audience to our games to really see these talented players that have been developed in the Rangers structure and continue to develop now in our structure, and hopefully go back and play in the absolutely highest level.
For our listeners, the three players that were with Rangers are Francis Jacobs, Aaron Cervantes, and Diego Lopez. Now, Oliver, with the partnerships in America, I mean, I used to cover FC Dallas. They have obviously that partnership with Bayern Munich, and I was a bit confused about what the partnership was to begin with. And then as I slowly talked to people in the club, I slowly understood what exactly the goal was. Can you explain the benefits that these type of partnerships actually offer clubs here in the United States?
Well, I think, to be honest with you, our partnership is unique. I don't know if there's another partnership in the United States with a pro team with a European club the way we have set it up. Because for us, first and foremost, as I said, the essence is soccer, is player development. Where even though I think a lot of the other clubs, especially the big clubs in Europe, say they want to do the same thing, but truly, it's also to just to establish a better brand awareness for them in the American market. That's obviously very, very big. We're not interested in wearing a European brand, their logo just in our jersey for the sake of saying that they can develop their brand. That will come obviously organically by our partnership. What we wanted to make sure is that we truly have a partner that it's all about developing soccer players from a young level to the first team and to an international partner. And that goes both ways. And I think there's other partnerships with big clubs. And again, the MLS clubs, they have some partnerships, but then the player movement there is not as easy as it is with us. Again, we control our players. We have a clear vision, what we want to accomplish, and we're going to maximize that vision with the Rangers partnership, but still keep obviously our own identity in Orange County, where we want to continue to develop our players along with them, but also find a bigger network of players that play in Southern California and potentially nationwide that should be coming to Orange County, because they'll be given the opportunity to be fully developed in professional structure and hopefully go move on to the next level when they're ready to go.
I have a question regarding just youth on a global scale. Is America viewed as the top place to gather youth, or do European clubs go, well, there's potential, but there's a lot of problems with the structure of youth development, pay to play, the expensive nature of it? No better example is than the recent MLS draft, when you saw the player houses or the homes of the players and their parents. They all made a lot of money. These houses are big. It seems like soccer is, quote unquote, the rich man's sport.
Well, I think it's not only that it's the rich man's sport, and obviously it's expensive to play youth soccer with the travel and all there. And look, many youth clubs, including what we had at West Coast Football Club, we had obviously big scholarship funds to develop these players. But I think it was always truly looked at when a player is as talented as a player in Europe, and obviously here, he plays youth soccer, and the goals go through high school and potentially go into college, and then at age 22, 23, he becomes a professional player. Where in Europe, the most talented players at a young age, 15, are developed in a professional structure. It's a completely different pathway. So I still think American soccer, right, for the most of the players that are playing, and they get a scholarship to go to college, to get an education through the youth clubs, that's that mission accomplished. But for the pro teams, we're looking for the top talents. And for them, that cannot be that pathway, because as we discussed earlier, the most talented players at a much younger age need to be developed onto the next level. And that has to be done in a professional setting on a daily basis. So absolutely, the European teams are looking at the United States as a big, big opportunity market for talented players to sign them as a Jeep, because even within a country like Switzerland, if a 15-year-old player would move from one club to another club, there would be a significant transfer fee, and a training compensation would be due. And that obviously doesn't exist yet in the United States. I know the MLS is now enforcing that, but that will still take some time to get all that up and running. And most of the other players truly can leave for free. And that has to change, because when a club develops a player, spends resources on players, they should be taken care of. And I can even tell you this: if we grab a player from a local youth club and end up moving this player on to the next level, we will actually give some financial resources back to that club, because they've done their job. And if we work together, then I think ultimately they will recommend the best talented players and have a much better chance of finding the best players in the community and move them on together.
Now, Oliver, you recently said you hope to have Brian Cayo back this season, but there is also international attention on the player. Can you give us an update on the current discussions going on with him?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Brian Cayo, goes without saying, is a very talented young player that we felt would do really well in our settings, and we were fortunate enough to bring him into us for the remainder of last year's USL Championship season, and then he was called into the World Cup, and he was obviously gone for the last month of it, and good for him. Brian is obviously on the radar of many European teams, and so for us, we are in current negotiations and discussions with his agent to bring him back to us and to continue to play for us, and then move him on to Europe. But it also goes without saying, there's obviously a lot of European clubs who have been watching him closely, and this is the beauty of the business. But no matter of fact, we gave Brian the first professional contract, and he developed in our structure, and I think he prepared him for the World Cup, where unfortunately didn't play as many minutes as probably we all wanted to. But again, he is now was called into the first national team, and talking actually to the staff yesterday, he's doing really, really well. So I think it's just exciting times for a young, talented American player that hopefully will not only make a difference for us or for whatever the team he plays, but ultimately for the U.S. national team and go on and do great things for us.
Oliver, I want to shift to more of the player acquisition standpoint. Obviously, we just saw a super draft conclude. Actually, I think there's a couple more rounds later this week. How quickly do you and other USL clubs put out feelers on some of the guys who are selected, in the draft to gauge their interest in making a move to your club? If it doesn't work out for them or in MLS, or if they end up being undrafted and that sort. Do you guys use the super draft as a way to acquire players?
Yeah, 100%. We are looking at all of these players. Our scouting system is obviously tracking these players, and you even look at it with Miguel Berry, who was the number 7 pick, right, by Columbus. Miguel Berry played obviously in San Diego, and he's played for our U23 team the last 2 seasons, so we're very, very familiar with him. He got drafted into the MLS, so good for him. But that's definitely, without saying, that's a player that we're very familiar with, and if he doesn't end up working out for him right from bat one in Columbus, which is a very good team, of course we'd be interested to have him and play for us and continue his development. But yes, I mean, a lot of these players nowadays are being drafted. It's fair to say that it's going to be difficult for the majority of them to step into an MLS team and have a significant impact. So we have very, very good relationships with most of the MLS teams, and they know when a player comes to us that we're spending a lot of time and effort in developing the player, and he ends up being a better player when he goes there. And historically, we have worked very closely with the LA Galaxy, LAFC, Columbus, New York, and these players who've come to us when they've gone back and played for the team did well. So I think it's about building a tradition and the relationships where these MLS teams realize when they have young projects they want to develop, that Orange County Soccer Club is a club these players truly develop and get better.
Again, when I'm reading articles, obviously talking about how USL players are undervalued assets in in the U.S. soccer marketplace, and often in European leagues, you do see some of the players in the lower division get bought up by clubs in the top flight. Why don't we see that as much in U.S. soccer? I mean, we've seen the success stories with like a Mark Anthony Kaye going from Louisville City to LAFC. I mean, Ozzy Alonso back in the day coming up with the Sounders. Why don't we see that more often between USL and MLS?
I don't think there's really specific reason why. I think there's a lot of players that are available. And I agree with you. Look, the difference between the top USL player and the fringe MLS player, I don't think there is much. I think it's sometimes, it's a coach's decision. Again, in the MLS, you have a salary cap. Obviously, these players have to fit into it. And some of them have relationships with players are moving back and forth. But I think also the USL Championship by itself is establishing itself as a very solid league that has a very high level of play, and there's a lot of players that enjoy playing in the USL Championship. For example, we have players in Aidan Quinn and Kevin Alston, that very easily could play in an MLS team, or players like Michael Orozco that we were fortunate enough to get last year's, or the player Thomas Enevoldsen who played for Denmark in the 2010 World Cup. I mean, these are players who come to us who enjoy the competition, enjoy playing in the USL Championship. So it's also sometimes some of these players are perfectly happy playing in here because they enjoy themselves. And so I think there's a combination of multiple reasons, but fundamentally, are the USL players good enough to play in the MLS? Yes, 100%. And I think as we move on forward, there might be more of these players coming, because I think the MLS should be looking at the USL for especially domestic talent, even some of the young international players that come out and play for clubs like us, to looking at them, because they're already playing in an American system. They understand the traveling, which is never easy, right? When you have to go to 34 games to 17 different cities, that some of them have high altitude, some of them it's very hot. And I think so the player that's played in the USL and proven to be a contributor, I think will also do really well in the MLS.
And Oliver, last question here before we let you go. You and your wife started a nonprofit organization called Soccer for Hope back in 1998. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, my soccer career came to an end after I was diagnosed with severe aplastic anemia, and I had a bone marrow transplant at City of Hope Cancer Center in Tuarty. And it was very clear, as a former professional player, me and my wife wanted to give back to the doctors who saved my life, but also wanted to make a difference. And so we founded Soccer for Hope, and truly 23 years later, right, we've been fortunate enough to raise millions of dollars to help children's hospitals nationwide, and really try to make a difference for families who unfortunately have to go on a journey and deal with children who are being diagnosed with cancer. And we want to be a difference maker there and be a support system for these people and help them financially. So anybody who wants to get involved with Soccer for Hope, we have a website, soccerforhope.org. It's 100% volunteer. It's nonprofit, and we just want to make a difference in the community. So I appreciate you guys mentioning this, because obviously sometimes we forget in our competitive environment in the professional game that it's all about winning or losing. But the reality is there's many soccer families who are dealing with a much, much bigger challenge. And if we can give back, and our organization is very supportive of it, our players are very supportive of it, then I think that's what we're probably going to be ultimately judged in what we accomplish there.
Wow, very cool. Listeners, I encourage you to go donate if you have some extra cash lying around. And Oliver, Jake, and Armand are going to hate me for asking you this question, but you are Swiss. Let me just get a 1-minute take on the Swiss national team, and your hopes with the European Championships that are coming up.
Well, I think, as you can tell, Switzerland has done really, really well the last few years with the European Cups and qualifying. And is Switzerland obviously has some top talented players. I think the majority of our top national team players are playing in the Bundesliga and the Premier League. They're very schooled, very disciplined. I think the Swiss coaching education and the Swiss level is on one of the absolutely highest standards. And we have very high goals. Is it realistic for Switzerland to go win the European Cup? It's probably a little bit far-fetched, but I think it's realistic that there's no team who's going to play Switzerland think they're just going to walk through them and destroy them, and that's very much there. So I'm always hopeful that Switzerland will obviously win a major trophy, but I think the fact that we're always representing ourselves really well, winning qualification groups and go on there. Hey, who knows? Obviously, as a Swiss player and as a Swiss person, I hope we're going to go as far as we possibly can. And if we get to beat Germany, then that's always a very special feeling for us.
I don't have expectations to win it all, but, a deeper run, not getting always knocked out in the round of 16 would be nice.
I think that would be beautiful, and I think we are a neutral country, so we keep our prediction in our neutral system.
Yes.
But yeah, absolutely. I think this is probably one of our best Swiss teams we'll send to the European Cup, and I'm excited to see how far they can go.
Absolutely. Well, Oliver, we appreciate the time. Listeners, check out what Orange County Soccer Club is doing in the USL, and as well, if you have some extra cash lying around, donate for Soccer for Hope. Oliver, best of luck this upcoming year, and hopefully we'll have you back on at some point in the future.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Truly enjoyed it, and I look forward to working together in the future as well, too, and accomplishing some of the goals we discussed today.
Great. Thank you. Well, there you have it, guys. A wrap to today's show. And Jake, boy, was it a busy one. We talked a little bit about Chicharito. Had some comments come in regarding whether or not he is a bigger signing than David Beckham, or at least on equal status. Some listeners agreed, others haven't. Then we talked to Adam Belz of the Scuffed Podcast regarding the youth national team Olympics. Boy, was it busy. And then Oliver Wyss, who gave us great insight into what it's like, commanding a club in America when you want to provide not only opportunity to youth, but also have a business and then being successful. Crazy, crazy day for Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast.
Yeah, I really like when Oliver Wyss was talking about adding that sell-on clause with some of the players that they would sell on. I thought that was an interesting little tidbit he added to the interview that I'm not so sure a lot of GMs or presidents of soccer operations would let you in on. So that was a nice little wrinkle, a nice little behind the scenes that he added there for us in his little interview there that we conducted with him. But that is it for today's show. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at UncSamSoccerPod. Make sure you follow Steven Jodaran at Steven Jodaran and myself at Jake Watroba. We will be back next Sunday, 8 p.m. Central Time, for another live installment of Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast. So make sure you look out for that. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, again, at Uncle Sam's Soccer Pod, send them in. We love to hear them. We love to get your feedback. If you have any questions that you'd like for us to answer, that would be awesome. Until next Sunday, I'm Jake Watroba. He's Steven Jodaran, and this has been Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast.
Bye.